found the eviction letter in my son's desk drawer on a Wednesday that smelled like rain. At first, I thought it was junk mail, until I saw my name, typed in bold. Notice to vacate 30 days. It was my address. My little yellow house on Juniper Street, the one I bought with my husband, the one I'd spent a lifetime paying off. And below that, a signature that looked like mine. Almost mine. The E was right. The D was close. But the tail on the S? Too neat. I make messy tails. That's when my hands started shaking. Because whoever signed this wasn't just taking my house. They were pretending to be me. I called my son, the one who promised to always take care of me. He laughed it off, said it was probably a scam. But deep down, I already knew. It wasn't a scam, it was a betrayal. By 8:30 that night, I'd be staring across my kitchen table at my son and his perfect wife, holding that letter in my hand and hearing the lie that would change everything. My name is Eleanor Dawes, and this is the story of how I almost lost my home and how I learned what it really means to fight for it. The envelope was thick and stiff, the kind of paper that carries bad news with a formal confidence. My name, Eleanor Dawes, was typed in a bold font that wasn't quite friendly. The return address belonged to a property management company in Austin I'd never heard of. When I slid it open with my thumbnail, a fine line of paper dust caught in the afternoon light like pollen. I read the first line and felt the air leave my body. Notice to vacate. 30 days. It listed my address, my little yellow house on Juniper Street in Round Rock, the one with the hand-painted mailbox and crepe myrtle I'd coaxed through 3 droughts. It cited a transfer of beneficial interest, language that sounded like a stranger trying to repossess your family photo album because they decided the smiles belonged to them. What scared me wasn't the letter itself. It was how my name appeared on the signature line below, a slanted E and a stretched D, close enough to my hand to make me dizzy, but wrong in a way you'd only notice if you'd written it for 68 years. The tail on the S was too neat. I make messy tails. Frank, my late husband, used to say even my signature walked like it had somewhere to be. This one pranced. The cat purred louder, or maybe it was my blood rushing in my ears. I folded the letter back into the envelope, slid it into my purse, and sat at the edge of their couch like a student called to the principal's office. Tyler and Madison's living room always reminded me of a rental furniture showroom. White couch, white rug, white candles on a white tray. Nothing in it looked comfortable enough to put your feet on, not even the rug. The only things that looked lived in were the ring light by the window and the wall of staggered floating shelves with plants that never drooped because they weren't real. I called my son. "Hey, Ma," he answered, distracted, like he always sounded when he was trying to keep me in his ear and some other world in his eyes. "Everything good with Finn? You fed him?" "I fed him, Ty." I had to swallow twice to get the rest out. "Tell me why there's an eviction notice in your desk with my name on it." He didn't answer right away. I heard that long, thin silence that stretches when someone is trying to decide which lie will land softer. "Oh, that," he finally said, all breezy. "Yeah, some scam company's been mailing weird stuff. You know how it is. If you get anything like that, toss it. I've been meaning to tell you. Scam companies don't list my address with a transfer clause and a docket number. Ma." His voice dipped into that patient tone adult children use when they're about to move your furniture without asking. "You're working yourself up over nothing. Did you sign anything?" I looked at the cat and it blinked at me, then yawned like it already knew. "For what?" Tyler laughed, a little too sharp at the end. "I don't even know what you're talking about. Listen, I'm about to head into a thing. Can I call you later?" "Call me when you're done with your thing," I said. "We're going to talk about this, Tyler. Tonight." He exhaled into the phone, a tired sound that made me feel like I was an inconvenience on his calendar. "Fine, we'll come by after. 8? I hung up and sat very still, because it felt like if I moved too fast, everything would spiral away from me, including my house. I looked at the pictures on their wall. Madison in red lipstick with her chin tilted toward the light. Tyler in a navy suit that made him look like the boy he used to be when he was trying his best. Both of them by a rooftop pool somewhere expensive and anonymous. My son's smile was still the same as when he was 5 and held up his little league trophy. Proud, a little stunned, brimming with hope that good things might finally stick. I drove the back roads home, past the HEB and the high school football field where the Friday night lights had once been the brightest thing in our lives. The crepe myrtle by my yellow house had a branch that needed trimming. I noticed things like that when I was trying not to notice other things. I made coffee that tasted like a memory and sat at my kitchen table under the calendar with bluebonnets I'd bought at the library fundraiser. The envelope lay between my coffee cup and the jar of sugar like a third guest. When Tyler and Madison knocked at 8:30, they didn't wait for me to say come in. They never did. She breezed in on perfume that smelled like orchids and vanilla, wearing sneakers whose price I could have guessed within $20, because the brand wrote it right across the heel in letters tall as my thumb. He trailed behind, handsome in the way boys who grow up loved are handsome. Even his worry lines couldn't ruin it. Madison smiled at me the way you smile at a neighbor who's always in the yard. "Ellie," she said, because she stopped calling me Mom the day she started calling her followers my girls. "What's going on? We had to leave before dessert." I held up the envelope. "What is this?" She didn't look at it at first. She looked at Tyler. He didn't look back at her. He looked at my refrigerator magnets. "It's nothing," he said. "We told you. Say nothing again and watch me set this letter on fire on the porch so the whole neighborhood can see the smoke." My voice surprised all 3 of us. It was steelier than I meant it to be. Some voices find you when you've had enough. Madison laughed a laugh that belonged in a rehearsal studio. "Drama. You should hear yourself." "Ty," I said, softening because his eyes had gone to that place I used to call the pit, a private cave he hadn't come out of for stretches at a time since his teen years. "Please." He rubbed the back of his neck. "We were going to talk to you this weekend. It's just, the timing's been off, and I didn't want you to worry until we had a plan." "What plan requires my forged signature?" I slid the paper across the table. "Do you see this? Eleanor. She's trying to imitate me, but she cleans her S's." Madison glanced at the signature, then kissed her teeth like the whole thing was beneath her. "Okay, first of all, no one forged anything. Ty said you gave him permission last year when you had your procedure. The power of attorney thing? We had it notarized." I put both hands flat on the table so I wouldn't shake. I had stents put in 3 years ago, not last year, and I didn't sign anything but the hospital form about how long they could keep my nail polish on. There is no power of attorney. If there is, it's as fake as your planted olive tree. She frowned. "It's a ficus." "Then it's a lying ficus." Tyler let out a breath that sounded like surrender and held up both hands in a small plea. "Ma, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He dragged a chair out and sat down like someone had cut the strings that kept his body upright. I got into a mess. 2 messes. The first is an investment that went sideways, but it'll come back. The second is a cash advance I took to hold us over for a few weeks. The rates are high, but that's how it is now. It's the only way to get ahead unless you want to be stuck like... He stopped. He looked at my table as if the wood might give him a script. "Stuck like me?" I offered, and I didn't bother to whisper how that word stung. "Go on." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's complicated, but the house is... It's just equity, Ma. It's sitting there doing nothing. We talked to a guy who helps families leverage what's stuck in their walls. No one's taking your house. It's like a temporary transfer that unlocks funding. Then we move it back. Everyone does this now." Madison crossed her arms and leaned her hip against my counter like it belonged to her. "We're trying to scale. We have opportunities. People in our space don't get old school about things. You should be thrilled your home is working for the legacy. Otherwise, you're just letting it rot under the Texas sun." My mind did what minds do when the heart is under attack. It flashed pictures to remind you of what you're about to lose. Frank in his postal blues on the porch, homemade lemonade sweating on the rail. Tyler at 8, wobbling down the sidewalk on a bike with a baseball card clipped to click against the spokes. Sunday afternoons when I'd sew curtains and listen to the Cowboys on the radio with Frank and pretend my stitches were cheers. The mortgage we paid on time for 27 years. the time the roof caved in during a thunderstorm, and our neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, came over with a tarp and a roll of duct tape and a grin as wide as the sky. The little yellow house had never been equity to me. It was our proof that we had stayed. "Give it back," I said. "Whatever you did, undo it. We're not talking about opportunities or scale or ficuses. We're talking about my home." "They'll reverse the transfer once the loan resets," Tyler said, quick. "Like 60 days tops. Don't panic." Madison's smile turned syrupy. "Ellie, we adore you, and we want what's best for you. Once we clean this place out, declutter, repaint, stage it, we can either get you into a modern condo with an elevator and great neighbors your age, or we can talk assisted living. It's not a bad word. You'll have activities and everything. They have watercolor classes on Tuesdays." "Madison," I said, because I had a sudden bright vision of throwing her sneakers into my backyard, setting them on fire, and roasting a marshmallow over the soles. "If you use the phrase your age at me one more time, I will put you back in your car seat and buckle it so tight your eyelashes will tingle." Tyler pressed his fingers to his eyes. "Ma, you did this," I said to him. "Not way. You." He was quiet. The kind of quiet that tells you the truth would sound uglier than silence. Then he looked up, and I saw my little boy behind the scruff and the suit and the bravado. "I was drowning," he said. "I didn't know where else to go. I thought I could fix it before you had to know." "How much?" "Does it matter?" Madison cut in. "It does." I kept my eyes on my son. "How much?" He swallowed. "A lot. Numbers, Tyler. Give me a number." He stared at the floorboards like they could wink him out of the room. "$3.50, he whispered. I thought he meant $3.50, and my poor brain was filling in cents to protect us. "350 what?" "1,000, he said. For a second, everything inside me went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator's old motor like a heartbeat. Then noise rushed back. Blood, breath, the echo of the word 1,000 rattling around my kitchen like a pot dropped on tile. "We're going," Madison said. "This is spiraling. We'll chat when you've calmed down." She took Tyler by the elbow as if she could pull him out of his own life. "No," I said, "you're not going. You're going to sit. The two of you are going to tell me what you did, and then you're going to go get me every scrap of paper you have on it, because tomorrow morning I'm going to the county clerk's office, and I'm going to ask nice and patient questions until someone tells me why my name is on a transfer and my house is on a list." Madison laughed again, but there was a wobble in it. "You think you're going to outlawyer a contract?" "I'm not going to outlawyer anyone," I said. "I'm going to outmother my son." They didn't sit. They left in a flurry of offended perfume. The door clicked shut so gently it was rude. I went to bed and lay awake until the sky thinned to gray, then got up and made coffee that I drank standing at the sink like a soldier. At 8:30 on the dot, I was at the Williamson County Clerk's office with my hair pulled back and my wedding band on a chain around my neck because I always wore it there on days I needed Frank's good sense. The clerk was a woman about my age with a name badge that said Patty. Patty had the kind of face that had seen everything and made room for more. "How can I help you?" she asked, and I put the Social Security tone in my voice that gets people to lean in and listen. "I need to look up a deed transfer that may involve my property," I said. "I think something's been filed with my name and I didn't sign anything." Patty's eyebrows went up just enough to show she wasn't new. "Okay, honey," she said, and we pulled up my parcel number on a monitor that had probably been new when dial-up was. She scrolled and clicked and clucked. "Here we are," she said. "Transfer of beneficial interest to Longhorn Equity Partners, LLC, filed 6 weeks ago, notarized by a Miss K. Price, recorded at 3:17 p.m. on a Friday." K. Price. I felt the floor tilt. Madison's cousin, Kendra, had a notary stamp she liked to flash on Instagram like it was a trophy. "May I see the document?" Patty slid the paper off the printer with both hands as if she were handing me a newborn. I traced my eyes over the lines. There it was again, that almost me signature, sitting beside a neat printed clause that said I had executed the transfer willingly. in the presence of a notary public who had checked my identification and found me to be the very woman I've been my whole life. Patty leaned over and peered at the print with me. "You sure this is you?" she asked, mother to mother. "Not unless I got real tidy and forgot. You want the notary's log?" She looked around, then lowered her voice. "We're not supposed to offer like we're in a movie, but I've got a cousin who got burned like this. You'd be surprised how many cousins I have." We copied what we could. Patty gave me a list of offices to visit like a scavenger hunt for the aggrieved. On my way out, a man with kind eyes and a silver mustache held the door for me. His hands were big and slow, the kind of hands that build things or fix them or hold them steady. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, and I could tell he meant it. "Ask me after I win a fight I didn't sign up for," I said, and he smiled like he knew a thing or two about both fights and choice. "Samuel Whitaker," he said, and stuck out a hand. "They call me Sam. I hang around down here doing volunteer mediation. Retired from the bench. You look like someone who's about to need half a dozen things and a cup of coffee." I shook his hand. "I'm Ellie." "Nice to meet you, Ellie." He tilted his head in a way that made you feel the air get lighter. "If you want a name for a legal aid attorney who doesn't scare easily, I know one. I want a name for someone who can pull a bulldozer out of my front yard without me going to jail," I said, and he chuckled in his chest like thunder muffled by distance. "Harper Nguyen," he said, and wrote it on the back of an old business card from a barbecue place. "She's over at Central Texas Legal Aid. Tell her Sam sent you." I tucked the card into my purse like a wafer you don't want to break. On the way home, I stopped at the H-E-B for dish soap and bananas and a bouquet of sunflowers because sometimes you have to buy yourself something bright to have something to put on the table when you sit down with bad news. Rosa Alvarez was sweeping her porch when I pulled into my driveway. She's been my neighbor since the days when we sat on lawn chairs with a bowl of shell peas between us, gossiping about our husbands like they were football teams we loved and cursed in equal measure. Rosa is the kind of woman you want next to you in a foxhole or a produce aisle. She used to be a paralegal at a firm in Austin and still pronounces words like affidavit, the way some people say amen. "Where have you been?" she asked, her broom stopping mid-swipe when she saw my face. "You look like you swallowed a lemon and it grew thorns." "Rosa," I said, my voice doing that thing it does when I'm about to either cry or shout. "I think Tyler signed my house away to some kind of company with a longhorn in its logo." Rosa didn't gasp. She put her broom away, walked over, and took the envelope out of my hand like she was about to baptize it. "Come inside," she said. "We're making tea, and then we're making copies." We did both. We spread papers across her dining table like we were planning a heist about to go righteous. She read aloud as she circled phrases with a purple pen that made me feel smarter, just watching it glide. Beneficial interest, transferee, notarized by... She underlined K. Price and tapped the dot with the tip of her pen. "That's Madison's cousin, isn't it?" I nodded. "She notarizes selfies." Rosa's mouth flattened into a line so thin it could cut glass. "We'll start with Harper, and we'll need a handwriting expert, which sounds fancy. But there's a woman in Pflugerville who's testified more times than I've eaten tamales." She looked up at me over her glasses. "You still have your voter registration? Driver's license? Anything with your signature?" "I have Frank's love letters," I said, before I realized that wasn't relevant. He always made me sign mine as if we were in the military and needed to file things. "Those may help too," she said, so kindly it made my chest ache. I called Harper right there at Rosa's table. She answered on the third ring with a voice like someone who had learned early how to be firm with men who didn't listen. "Harper Nguyen." "Miss Nguyen," I said. "My name is Eleanor Dawes. I think my son signed my house over to a company using a forged power of attorney that I can't find because I'm pretty sure it's imaginary." "Tell me more, Miss Dawes," she said, with interest and a kind of gentleness that felt like a hand on my back guiding me down a dark hallway. "And please call me Harper," I told her. I read the letter, stumbling only when I got to my wrong signature. Rosa sent the notarization photo that Madison's cousin had posted 6 weeks ago as a boomerang with sparkles. When your bestie's mama trusts you with the pen. And Harper sighed the way professionals sigh when people commit crimes in glitter. First, we file for a temporary restraining order to stop any sale or transfer, Harper said. We'll argue elder financial exploitation, forgery, and void the transfer for lack of consent. I'll need your IDs, examples of your signature, and any connections you can prove between your daughter-in-law and the notary. Cousins, I said. Cheesecake on Christmas. Matching pajamas. Everything you need. We'll also notify the title company if one's involved, she continued. Sometimes a little afternoon phone call from a legal aid attorney makes them suddenly interested in ethics. She paused. Do you have someone with you? I have Rosa, I said. Then you're already halfway home, she said. Come in tomorrow morning, bring everything. We'll get this moving fast. I slept that night in my own bed, but it felt like camping in a museum. I put Frank's love letters on the nightstand and touched the paper to remind myself of the life we'd already paid for. In the morning, I made oatmeal and added too much brown sugar because comfort, then caught the early bus into Austin because Harper said parking was hateful and I didn't have energy for hate that day. Harper was younger than I expected, with hair pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail and sneakers that said she didn't have time to worry about her arches. She shook my hand and looked me in the eye. It's a simple gesture, but it made me want to cry again. I handed her the folder Rosa and I had assembled, and Harper skimmed with the speed of someone who reads like other people breathe. Okay, she said. We file the TRO today. There's a hearing in 72 hours. In the meantime, do not, under any circumstances, leave the house empty. If someone shows up with a lockbox or offer sale sign, call me. Then call the police. Then call a news station if you're feeling spicy. Spicy, I repeated, tasting the word like a pepper you're not sure will burn you. I can do spicy. Good, she said, because this is going to make people uncomfortable. The company will threaten. Your son will apologize and blame the company. Your daughter-in-law will gaslight. The notary will suddenly remember she notarized a tomato. We need you steady. I can be steady, I said, even though I felt like a bird that had just flown into a window and was pretending to be fine on the ground. On my way back to Round Rock, I stopped by the little coffee shop on Main Street because a sign in the window said cinnamon rolls today. And sometimes God speaks plainly. When I carried my coffee to a table, I saw the man from the county clerk's office, Sam, with a book in one hand and a slice of pecan pie in the other that looked like absolution. He looked up and smiled in a way that made you feel like you were already part of his day. Ellie, he said, as if we'd been meeting for years. How'd the morning go? We filed something with letters, I said, sitting before he could invite me because I was too tired to be shy. A TRO. I'm learning new words at 68, and I thought the only thing left to learn was how to make my biscuits fluffy in August. His eyes warmed. The law is just another recipe, he said. You add the right ingredients in the right order and hope the oven's honest. What if the oven's owned by the company trying to eat your house? I asked. Then you bring friends who've baked in worse ovens, he said. If you need me at the hearing, I'll sit in the back and scowl appropriately. Thank you, I said, surprised at how much those words filled my mouth. My neighbor Rosa's helping too, and Harper is young, but she sounds like she could politely disassemble a tank. He laughed, then sobered. I've seen a lot of sons in my day, he said, like a confession. Some who would walk into fire for their mamas, some who would light the match and call it a candle. He took a bite of pie and set his fork down slowly. Whatever Tyler is right now, you can love him without letting him ruin you. I nodded because that sentence was a coat I needed to put on and wear until it felt like mine. 2 days later, a white SUV pulled up in front of my house and a man with a smile you could use to cut rope hopped out. He wore a blazer that created its own weather and shoes that had never met a gravel driveway. You must be Eleanor, he said brightly. I'm Colton with Sunburst Realty. We're just going to pop a little sign in the yard and get some photos. Nothing disruptive. He walked toward my porch like it was a stage he'd been booked to perform on. I stepped outside, the TRO paperwork in one hand and my phone in the other. Colton, I said, if you put anything in my yard today, it will be your car keys because you threw them while running from the police. He laughed. You're cute. I like you. I didn't smile. I have a restraining order and a neighbor who can run faster than she looks. Rosa appeared on cue with a garden hose in her hand and the look of a woman who had waited her whole life to aim water at a person in loafers. Harper pulled up a minute later and got out with a folder so thick it made Colton's smile wobble. She handed him a copy of the order and a letter that made his eyebrows twitch when he read it. "Ah," he said, clearing his throat, "I seem to have been placed in the middle of a domestic misunderstanding." "This is not domestic," Harper said evenly. "This is criminal adjacent. If you or any agent of Longhorn Equity sets foot on this property between now and the hearing, I'll file and then I'll tweet." Colton's smile slipped off his face like a sticker that doesn't stick anymore. He backed away, hands up as if we were holding slingshots. "No problem," he said to the air. "We'll regroup. Good luck with whatever." He left. Rosa and I went inside and laughed so hard we had to lean on each other like girls. The hearing was 2 days after that. The courthouse smelled like old books and lemon cleaner, and the chairs in the gallery had gotten meaner since the last time I'd sat in one. Tyler was there with Madison, who wore a black dress appropriate for both court and a sponsored post. Longhorn Equity sent a lawyer with a beard that tried to make him look trustworthy. He introduced himself as Mr. Drummond and smiled at me like he hoped I'd forget my own name. We took our seats. Sam slipped into the back quietly, as promised. When I turned around and saw him, he touched the brim of a hat he wasn't wearing and grinned. I exhaled for the first time in 3 days. The judge was a woman about my age with a silver streak in her hair and a stare that made any nonsense think twice before entering the room. She read Harper's filing and Mr. Drummond's reply as if reading bedtime stories to children she liked but didn't trust. "We're arguing whether the transfer was obtained by fraud and whether the notarization is valid," Harper said when it was time to speak. "We're also asking the court to prohibit any further encumbrance or attempt to evict Miss Dawes from her home pending a full hearing." Mr. Drummond stood. "Your Honor, with respect, this is a misunderstanding. Miss Dawes executed a limited power of attorney last year in the presence of a notary. Her son acted under that authority to arrange a temporary financing vehicle for family benefit. There's no harm, no foul. The notary is willing to testify. The notary is a cousin by marriage to the son's wife," Harper said without looking at her paper. "We have photos of the notarization on social media that show zero identification being presented. We also have Miss Dawes' bus ticket and a church event roster placing her 50 miles away at the time this notarization supposedly occurred." Mr. Drummond glowered like a man who hadn't expected anyone to be competent. "Coincidences." "Perjury," Harper said sweetly. The judge looked at me over her glasses. "Miss Dawes, would you step up?" The witness stand was harder than it looked on TV. It was a sticky kind of hard, the kind that grabs at your clothes and your composure. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth, so help me God. And I meant it. Even though God and I were not on perfect speaking terms that week. "Miss Dawes," the judge said, "did you sign a power of attorney granting your son authority to transfer your home to a limited liability company?" "No, Your Honor," I said. "The only power of attorney I ever signed was naming my friend Rosa to pick up my pecan pie at the church bake sale when I had the flu." There was a stitch of laughter from the back. The judge didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth softened half a degree. "Did you appear before a notary at any time last year?" "No, ma'am. If I had, I would have brought my reading glasses and my good pen." "Thank you." The judge looked past me to Tyler, then Madison, then somewhere beyond them where the consequences live. "Miss Nguyen, the temporary restraining order is granted. No transfer, no sale, no lockboxes, no signs, no harassment of Miss Dawes. We will reconvene in 2 weeks for a full evidentiary hearing. Mr. Drummond, instruct your client to preserve all communications with the notary and any agents involved. And if I see any hint of funny business between now and then, I'll find the loudest gavel we own." In the hallway afterward, Tyler caught up to me. He looked like he hadn't slept, and something in me wanted to cup his face the way I did when he was little and feverish and apologize for the world. But there's a difference between fever and fire. "Ma," he said, voice ragged, "can we talk? Alone?" "Say what you need to say," I said. Harper hung back politely. Sam stood with his hands in his pockets, pretending to read a notice for a community blood drive. "I screwed up," he said. "I know I screwed up. I thought I could juggle it, and then there were more balls, and my hands got slick. I shouldn't have dragged the house into it. I shouldn't have dragged you into it, but I don't know how to get out." Madison spoke up as if the problem was that she'd been too quiet. "What he needs is support," she said, "not this hostile energy. We're all on the same team." "We are not on the same team," I said. "We're not even playing the same sport. You are out there doing parkour on a rooftop. I am trying to keep my porch from being turned into a trampoline." "Why are you being like this?" Madison's voice climbed a ladder. "It's not like you were going to live in that house forever. You can't even get up on a step stool without calling Rosa." "Madison," Tyler said through his teeth, but I held up a hand. "No," I said. "Let her talk. Let the your age out in the open air where it can trip over its own shoelaces." She smirked, then saw something in my face that made her step back half an inch. "Whatever," she said. "I'm going to the car." Tyler watched her go, then looked at me with the shame of a boy who knows the teacher saw him cheat. "I'll fix it," he said. "I swear." "Fix yourself," I said. "Let other people fix the paper. Start with why you think anyone owes you a shortcut out of a hole you dug with a golden shovel." He flinched. "That's not fair." "It's not fair that you gambled with my home and then acted like I'm hysterical for objecting," I said. "Fair would be you working at the hardware store every morning and Ubering every night until 350 becomes 3. Fair would be you paying me rent to stay in your old room until you can rent a room somewhere else and calling it gratitude instead of shame. Fair would be you telling the judge that the notary was your wife's cousin and that you knew it was wrong to ask, but you asked anyway." He stared at the floor. "You want me to go to jail?" "I want you to be a man," I said. "I want you to become someone your father would recognize." 2 weeks later, the evidentiary hearing was an opera performed in monotone. Exhibits marked and entered, statements read without adjectives. Harper called the handwriting expert from Pflugerville, a woman with glasses on a beaded chain who handled my check carbons like museum pieces. She enlarged my signature and the fake one, circling the loops and slants. "The pressure here indicates the writer was trying to imitate rather than flow," she said, and then said 3 other sentences so technical even the judge nodded like a student who doesn't want to miss the bus. Then the notary took the stand. Kendra wore a blouse that had been bought for important days and a necklace that said manifest. She smoothed her hair and smiled like the camera light had just turned on. "Miss Price," Harper said, friendly as a neighbor leaning over the fence. "Where did you notarize Miss Dawes' signature?" "In her kitchen," Kendra said. "What day?" She gave a date. "At what time?" 2 p.m. Harper handed her a bus schedule and a church bulletin and waited, patient as a cat. "Did you check Miss Dawes' identification?" "Of course," Kendra said with a small gasp, as if the question were the insult. "Describe the ID you examined," Harper said. "A Texas driver's license," Kendra said promptly. "Expiration date?" Kendra blinked. "I don't memorize expiration dates." "Not asking you to," Harper said. "Asking whether you saw an expiration date." "Yes," Kendra said. "It was valid." Harper handed her a copy of my license. "You see the expiration date?" "Yes." "What is it?" "June," Kendra said, gaze darting. "Of which year?" Harper asked. "Last year," Kendra said. "My driver's license expired in June 8 years ago," I said into the silence, not meaning to speak, but the truth jumped out like a kid off a diving board. The judge didn't scold me. She just looked at Kendra in a way that made the notary's necklace suddenly look heavy. Later, Mr. Drummond tried to recast everything, but the air had shifted. When it was Tyler's turn, he took the stand with the slump of a man who knows the floor won't catch him if he falls. "Did your mother sign a power of attorney?" Harper asked. He looked at me. I looked at him. He swallowed. "No," he said, "she didn't." "Did you ask your wife's cousin to notarize anyway?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Did you sign on your mother's behalf?" He opened his eyes. "Yes." "Why?" "I was desperate," he said, and the word wobbled in the air, fragile as a soap bubble and just as temporary. I was in debt and I thought this company could help me flip it fast. They promised they'd move the deed back quickly. I told myself I was borrowing her name. Harper glanced at the judge, then at me. No further questions. The judge spoke for a long time after that, in the particular music of courtrooms. She said words like void, fraud, elder abuse, referral, sanctions. She said homestead in a way that made my house stand up straighter. When she was done, the transfer was gone, as if the paper had been swallowed by the past. Longhorn Equity was fined, Mr. Drummond was chastened, and Kendra was referred to the Secretary of State. The judge looked at Tyler for a full 5 seconds that felt like a year. "You will be hearing from people who do not have time to be gentle," she said. "Perhaps this will be the making of you." Outside the courthouse, the sky had the blinding purity of a day that refuses to ruin itself. Reporters had come because Harper had sent an email she called public education, and I smiled at the camera because I wanted other women like me to see this and feel their own spines lengthen. I said the thing Rosa told me to say. If someone makes you sign something you don't understand, don't sign it. If they make it sound urgent, make them wait. If they call you hysterical when you ask a question, call a lawyer. For a while after that, the days were quieter. Quiet doesn't mean simple. It means you hear your thoughts more clearly. Tyler moved out of the apartment he shared with Madison after she posted a video about boundaries and self-care, in which she said the word toxic 12 times. Her followers left hearts. He moved into a room above a garage a friend rented cheap, took a job at a hardware store off I-35, and went to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting on Tuesday nights at a church with a blue roof. Sometimes, after the meeting, he sat in our driveway and didn't come in and then drove away slowly. Sometimes he knocked and came in, and we drank decaf and talked about nothing important because the important things had to rest sometimes. I sold the living room couch and used the money to buy a mixer the color of a robin's egg. It felt like a small rebellion to spend on sugar. I baked pies, first for myself, then for Rosa, then for the choir practice sale. Sam came by one Saturday with 6 pounds of Georgia pecans someone had mailed him from his cousin in Macon and said he'd trade them for 2 pies and a conversation on the porch. "My mother made pecan pie the size of a hat," he said, picking a crumb off the cooling rack. "When she took it out of the oven, the men would come sniffing around pretending the football game needed their commentary in the kitchen." I laughed. Men used to be so confident that calling the TV plays in the kitchen was useful labor. We ate pie on the porch while the sun slipped down the street like a cat. He told me stories about juries who made him proud and defendants who made him pray. I told him about Frank, who once drove an hour out of his way to return a package to a woman who had put the wrong address on an invitation to her granddaughter's birthday party and cried when he showed up with a stack of envelopes and a roll of stamps. "You loved him," Sam said, not a question. "I still do," I said, not sorry for the present tense. "But it turns out love isn't a pantry you empty once. It refills. Sometimes with ingredients you never thought you'd use," he said. We didn't hurry anything. We didn't name anything. He'd stop by on Thursdays with a newspaper and 2 peaches, and I'd send him home with a slice of whatever I'd baked, and a story about Rosa's new conspiracy theory that the squirrels were organizing against her fig tree. It was a pleasant way to live. New kindness layered over old grief like a quilt made of pieces you saved because they mattered once and still mattered. The first fall after the hearing, I opened a little pop-up at the farmer's market called Ellie's Porch Pies. Rosa handled the cash box because she has fast fingers and an honest face. Sam made the sign. Tyler, who was on a later shift at the hardware store on Saturdays, set up the tent and folded chairs and made sure the cooler had enough ice. He didn't ask me for money. I didn't offer. We learned to stand next to each other without the heat of shame burning through our shirts. One slow morning, a woman with a strong jaw and a haircut that said she paid tips in cash stopped at my table. She picked up a tiny pie like it was a bird. "You Miss Dawes?" she asked. "I'm Detective Hargrove. We've been looking into Longhorn Equity and Miss Price's notary games. Your case broke something open. Got a handful of people we can help because you wouldn't back down." I gave her a mini pecan on the house and a thank you that made my throat sting. Later, I went home and sat at my kitchen table and cried onto my hands, because sometimes even good news hurts where the bad news used to live, Tyler called that evening. I got a raise, he said, voice bright in a way I hadn't heard in years. They want me to manage the morning crew. It's more responsibility and they trust me with the safe. That's good, I said, and let the pride come out unhidden, because pride is not a limited resource. I'm proud of you, son. I also paid the first installment to the court, he said, and I wrote a letter to Kendra. I told her I was sorry I dragged her into this and asked her to tell the truth when they call. She hasn't replied. That's fine. I'm trying to be the kind of person who writes those letters. You're becoming that person, I said. And we were quiet together for a moment, the best kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't avoid but allows. Thanksgiving that year was smaller than when Frank was alive, and the house burst with cousins and football and too many pies. It was me and Rosa and Sam and Tyler, and a woman named Bree from Tyler's meeting who brought green beans that tasted like they remembered being vines. We ate at the table and told stories and passed rolls. After dinner, Tyler stayed behind and helped me wash dishes like he used to when he was 13 and thought dishwater was a science experiment. He dried a plate and cleared his throat. Ma, he said, do you ever forgive yourself for everything you didn't do right? In the mornings, I do, I said. By evening, I need to start over. He nodded. I made a mess of so much of this. Sometimes I think I can never be the son you wanted. I wanted a son who was alive, I said. Everything else was decoration. He put the plate down. I don't deserve you. Deserving is a word people use when they want to make love into math, I said. We don't do that here. In January, Madison sent me a message. It said, no hard feelings. She included a link to a video called How I Navigated a Toxic Family Situation and Found Myself, sponsored by a pillow company. I didn't click it. I made a rule that winter. I did not click on anything that didn't feed me. Spring brought bluebonnets along the highway and a feeling that the world had exhaled after holding its breath. The farmer's market added a second day. I made hand pies with apple and cheddar because Rosa said savory is the future, and I trusted her instincts about anything that made my kitchen smell good. On the first Saturday of April, a woman about my age came up to my table with tears in her eyes and said she'd seen the news story and left her son's apartment where he was borrowing her name. She said she slept on a friend's couch and felt like a traitor and a pioneer in the same hour. You're both, I said, handing her a pie wrapped in wax paper. Heroes tend to be. One evening in May, I sat on the porch with Sam and watched the sky pretend to be a pop song, all pinks and oranges flirting with the roof lines. He had taken off his shoes and put his feet up on the step like a man who had found the kind of comfort he'd half forgotten existed. You ever think about leaving? He asked. I left all the time when I was young, I said, in my head. Took trains to New York and boats to Italy and buses to El Paso. Then I landed here and stayed because Frank loved me, and Tyler needed a backyard, and the mortgage was more honest than a landlord. Now I think about leaving less and arriving more. That's a good sentence, he said. You writing any down for that book you keep threatening to write? I write in my head while I measure flour, I said. The pages will be covered in sugar. He was quiet a moment. There's a cabin on a lake in East Texas my brother left me, he said, as if he were telling me a secret about someone nicer than himself. It's got a porch that sags and a dock that doesn't complain when you sit too long. If you ever want a weekend with no phones and a lot of frogs, I could take you. I like frogs, I said. They tell the truth about the weather, he smiled. So do you. The summer turned mean then, as Texas summers do, and the afternoons were so hot I had to bake at dawn. Tyler would show up at 5 and slice peaches, and we'd work side by side like two people who'd built a bridge without calling it that. One morning, he brought a stack of envelopes and dropped them on the table like a magician with a trick nobody asked for. What's that? I asked. Debt, he said, paid. Some of it. A little at a time. I send it in with a note that says, I'm still here. It helps me. It helps me too, I said, because we were on the same side of something old for once. The second fall after the hearing, I got a letter from the county about the homestead exemption. Someone had removed it when the fake transfer went through, and the taxes had jumped like a frightened deer. Harper had warned me about this part, the way damage limps behind decisions for years. I took the letter to Rosa and we filled out a form and handed it to Patty at the clerk's office. And she made a copy and said, "We'll fix it, honey." And I believed her because she had that Patty way of making you feel like the system could be domesticated with enough paper and patience. On the way out, I ran into Sam again, of course, because small towns and big counties keep two people circling each other until they end up in the same hallway. "You hungry?" he asked, like a man who knew the answer. "You asking," I said, like a woman who had learned to say yes. We went to the diner where they know you and the iced tea keeps coming until you're brave. He told me about his grandkids, and I told him about the lady at the market who paid for her pies with exact change and stories. He reached out like he might touch my hand, then thought better of it, and I liked that hesitation. I liked that we were two people who had learned how to want slowly. Thanksgiving again. Tyler came an hour early with a pie he'd made himself, with a store-bought crust, which he pretended was a choice and not a capitulation, and a grin that told me the pie didn't matter because the word made did. He had someone with him. Her name was Bree, the woman with the green beans, and she had a laugh that made me understand how a church basement could become a lighthouse. After dinner, he took me outside and stood on the porch with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, like a boy about to admit he broke a window. "I'm 6 months clean," he said, looking at the sky instead of my face. "I wanted to get a year before I told you, but Bree said sometimes you share the climb while you're still on the mountain." I didn't say anything first because I wanted his words to land on something quiet. Then I hugged him and felt the bones of his back under my palms, like the ribs of a boat that finally learned to float. "I am proud of you," I said. "I'm proud of you when you fail and try again. I'm proud of you when you try and fail better." He laughed into my shoulder. "That sounds like a sign in a kitchen." "It will be," I said. In December, Sam left a sprig of rosemary and a note on my porch. The note said, "For your roast, for your heart." I called him, and he came over with a bottle of something brown, and we sat on the steps in coats and watched our breath leave our mouths and turn into ghosts that rose and vanished. He took my hand, finally, like a man who'd asked himself every question, answered all of them with later, and then decided later was now. "Ellie," he said, and swallowed. "I don't mind a slow song, but I'd like to know if I'm dancing alone." "You're not," I said. "I just like to count the steps." We stayed like that a long time, hand in hand, like kids who discovered that the most dangerous thing you can do after 50 is let yourself be gentle. The winter was tougher on bills than on feelings. The heat rattled like a cough. Pies sold low. I told myself I was too old to worry about slow weeks, and then worried anyway. The universe threw me a bone in the form of a call from a woman who ran a small grocery co-op in Austin. She wanted to carry my pies. Rosa did the math on a legal pad and said I could do it if I didn't try to do everything else. Tyler hired a part-time kid from the hardware store to help pack. Sam showed up with a dolly and a grin because he liked lifting heavy things in front of me like a teenager who needed an audience. The day the co-op put my pies in the case, I dragged Sam to the cold section and made him stand with his hands in his pockets, like a conspirator, while I stared at my labels like they might peel themselves off in rebellion. "You did this," he said. "We did this," I corrected. "Add Rosa, Harper, Patty, the judge, and a handful of women I have never met but whose stories spoke to me like a choir." He nodded. "Community is just a fancy word for pies and paperwork." In the spring, the crepe myrtle in my front yard exploded in pink like it had been waiting to show off. The neighborhood kids rode their bikes in circles and shouted ideas at each other about building a fort under my porch. I put a pitcher of lemonade out and a stack of cups. One of the little girls, missing both front teeth, asked if she could pay me with a marble that looked like it had the moon inside it. "You can pay me with a promise," I said. "What kind?" she asked, suspicious of deals that didn't involve objects. "Promise me you'll never sign anything if a person tells you not to read it." She nodded solemnly and put the marble in my hand anyway, because kids know better than to let adults walk away with empty palms when they have magic to spare. Tyler started teaching a Saturday morning class at the hardware store called House Basics, where he showed people how to fix a running toilet and patch a hole and not install a ceiling fan upside down so it blows your bills around but doesn't cool a thing. He made a flyer with his photo on it and brought it to me with the kind of pride that has just enough humility to be beautiful. "I'm good at this," he said, as if the confession surprised him. "You always were," I said. "It just took you a minute to choose the right kind of screwdriver." He laughed. "And to stop using your toolbox to prop up my TV." One hot afternoon in June, I found a scrap of paper in the drawer where I keep the rubber bands. It was a note I had written to Frank the summer before he died, reminding him to water the tomatoes and to bring home milk and to kiss me like he meant it. It wasn't poetry, but reading it felt like standing at a window you'd forgotten was there. I took the note to the porch and sat with it until the sun moved and the shadow of the crepe myrtle slid across my legs like a cat. Then I put the note in the box where I keep my butter receipts and the letters from customers who say my pies taste like their grandmother's without apologizing for not being my grandmother. "That's a good look on you," Sam said, coming up the walk in a linen shirt that didn't try too hard. Sitting there holding history like it's a present. "It is," I said. "Want to come see the cabin?" he asked. "Water's high after the rain. Frogs are loud enough to scare the stars." We went. The cabin looked like every good decision. Solid, a little crooked, built by hands that knew the difference between level and right. We sat on the dock with our feet in the water and watched the moon put a coin down in the lake and ask it to keep it safe. He told me about his first case on the bench, a custody hearing where a mother had brought a pie to the bailiff. I told him about the time I almost left Round Rock at 21 and got as far as the bus station before a little girl with pigtails fell asleep against my shoulder, and I realized I couldn't leave a place where girls fell asleep against strangers and were carried carefully off by fathers wearing honest shirts. "Marry me," he said so softly I thought the frogs had invented the sentence. "Yes," I said, equally softly, because loud felt wrong and yes felt inevitable. We didn't make a fuss. We told Rosa first because you tell the general before you tell the army. We told Tyler by inviting him for dinner and putting 2 plates next to each other in a way that made the table look different even before he noticed the rings. He cried and then laughed and then hugged Sam in a way that made me think I had been knitting 2 pieces together without knowing it. The wedding was small. Bree brought green beans. Rosa brought champagne and a speech she had to get up to deliver because she gets stage fright sitting down. The judge from our hearing came, which surprised me until she told me she always likes to see how stories end. Patty came with a card that had a cartoon of a file folder getting married to a pie and the caption, "Best case ever." Harper came in sneakers and cried during the vows because she pretends to be made of steel, but she is made of Sunday morning pancakes. We said our promises under the crepe myrtle because it had watched over more than it needed to and deserved a front row seat to the next part. After, we ate cake on the porch and the neighbor kids rode their bikes in circles and shouted, "Congratulations!" like we had won something. In truth, we had. When the sun went down, Sam and I sat on the steps and listened to people clean up around us. Rosa bossed and laughed. Tyler collected plates, Bree hummed. The house breathed like an animal that had come to lie down against our legs. We didn't talk about the past because it wasn't going anywhere, and we didn't talk about the future because it would arrive whether we prepared a speech or not. We talked about nothing and meant everything. On our first married Monday, I taped a handwritten sign in my kitchen over the mixer. It said, "We do not use love to do math." I underlined it because underlining is another way of saying, I want to remember this when I'm sore and sleepy and tempted to make a ledger of every kindness and mistake. I did not forget the letter in the desk or the way it felt when Madison's shoes crossed my threshold like they owned the air on either side of them. I did not forget the judge's voice when she said my son's name like a bell that had to be rung before it could be quiet again. I did not forget how the house looked in the first light after the restraining order, as if it had been waiting for me to protect it and could finally relax. What I chose to remember more often were the pies cooling on wire racks while a man I loved read the newspaper on my porch and made small sounds when he liked a sentence. I chose to remember Tyler counting out exact change to a woman buying a pie and checking himself 3 times. Not because she didn't trust him, but because he had learned to be a man who didn't ask the world to do the math for him. I chose to remember the little girl with the moon marble and the way she nodded solemnly when I asked for a promise she would keep for the rest of her life. The summer after our wedding, I got an envelope from the state with the clean kind of paper. It said Kendra had lost her notary license and was paying a fine. It said an investigation into Longhorn Equity was ongoing and that my case had been referenced by people who make rules and try to keep the wolves from opening door-to-door franchises. I made 3 pies that day and took one to Harper's office and one to the clerk's office for Patty and one to the courthouse for the judge and the bailiff, who liked pecan pie. It felt right to bring sugar where there had been so much salt. Madison DM'd me in October with a photo of a baby that wasn't hers and a necklace that was. She said she had moved to Arizona to be near a man who invested in wellness retreats and that meanwhile she was focusing on me. I wished her well in my head because what I said out loud felt like lighting a match in a closet with no windows. She would live the life she chose. So would I. The day I turned 70, Tyler and Bree brought cupcakes with blue frosting and lit candles that made my kitchen look like it had caught a small, manageable fire. Sam gave me a secondhand book of poems with a note on the inside cover that said, "For the woman who taught me that dessert is a form of faith." Rosa gave me a framed print of my sign about love and math. The neighbor kids gave me a paper crown and insisted I wear it while I blew out the candles. I made a wish that wasn't so much a wish as a thank you disguised as hope. Later, when the house had gone quiet in that good way it does when the people you love have left their echoes in the rooms, I went and stood in the doorway of what used to be Tyler's bedroom. It's my sewing room now. The light falls differently in there than it used to. Softer, as if refracted through choices. I ran my fingers along the shelf where his trophies used to be and touched the little divots the nails had left, tiny moons in a sky of drywall. Then I went back to the kitchen, turned the mixer on low, and began to make a pie. As the sugar folded into the butter, I thought about that first letter in the white envelope and the way my hand had trembled when I saw my not signature. I thought about how fear had lived in my house, like a tenant for a while, and how we had evicted it with paper and patience, and the kind of love that refuses to be turned into rent. I thought about the recipe card my mother wrote in the looping, bossy handwriting of women who survived men who needed their shirts ironed and never learned to fold a fitted sheet. At the bottom of that card, after "bake until the filling doesn't slosh," she had written, "Let it rest. Don't cut too soon. It falls apart if you rush." The filling settled. The house exhaled. Outside, the crepe myrtle let go of a single petal and it floated down and landed on the porch like a quiet yes. In the living room, Sam turned a page and cleared his throat because a line had found him. On my phone, a message from Tyler pinged that said, "Love you, Ma. Thanks for helping me learn to stand." I put the pie in the oven, set the timer, and wrote back, "Me too." Then I stood at my kitchen sink, hands on the cool edge, and watched my yard remember that it belonged to me. I thought about how the world is full of letters, some that try to tell you to leave and some that invite you to stay, and I decided, as I have every morning since, that I would choose the letters I wrote myself. The next morning, I found a flyer tucked under my doormat for a neighborhood block party. It had a cartoon grill and a string of lights printed across the top. Someone had drawn a pie in the margin and written "Ellie" with 3 question marks. I took a pen and wrote "Yes" so big the exclamation point nearly broke through the paper. Then I taped it to the refrigerator next to a photo of me and Frank on our wedding day, and a photo of me and Sam on ours, and a photo of Tyler at the hardware store wearing a name tag that said "Tyler, here to help."